So many moms feel stuck and isolated, like they've got to keep it all together and can't say how hard it really is. On Let's Get Real, we talk about the real stuff, motherhood, mental health, and everything in between, so you don't feel like you have to carry it alone anymore. Because in order to heal, we have to get real. If you're feeling overwhelmed, grab the Overwhelmed Moms Guide. It's totally free and made to help you feel like yourself again. The link is in the show notes. Let's jump in. For many women, divorce isn't just the end of a relationship. It becomes an emotional and legal battle that they never saw coming. Suddenly, they're facing manipulation, intimidation, endless court hearings, and an ex who refuses to just move on. It leaves so many moms asking, how do I stay sane and protect my kids when this feels so overwhelming? Today, we're joined by Lisa Johnson, co-founder of Been There, Got Out, a high-conflict divorce strategist, certified domestic violence advocate, and someone who knows the system from the inside out. After enduring a year-long divorce that nearly cost $100,000, Lisa went on to represent herself through multiple court appearances, eventually winning a precedent-setting case that is now published in the Connecticut Law Journal. She and her partner Chris coach people all over the world who are navigating high-conflict divorce, custody battles, and post-separation abuse. Lisa, thank you so much for being here today. I am really looking forward to exploring this topic with you of just high conflict divorce and some of the aspects that most people don't realize are a part of a situation like this. So thank you so much for making the time today.
No, thanks for having the courage to talk about it, because domestic violence is something some people don't want to open up about.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I think about back to some of the early days when I was counseling clients and how so many of those women, unfortunately, were in domestic violence situations, and they just had no clue what resources were available, really people who were out there wanting to help guide them through this. So that's a near and dear to my heart. And I'm just really glad that you're someone who has been speaking up about this and shedding light on this issue and providing a lot of hope. So I'm really excited to get into it.
Thank you. I mean, just know that 1 in 2 people in abusive relationships doesn't even realize it.
That is wild. So it's that, I think of deceptive, where you don't even see the abuse and the degree of abuse that's happening. That is crazy.
Yeah. And I was one of them. Most people really have no idea, because I think in our minds, and this is what I thought too, you think of domestic violence or abuse as something physical. And I know that we have a domestic violence agency in my town, and in my head, I always assume, oh, that's for battered women. This most extreme cases, that's not for me. And it was only a year and 9 months after my divorce that I got connected to it through the police, when my ex was parked outside the house. And I thought, oh, it's probably no big deal. And they're like, actually, it's a really big deal, especially because it's been this much time. He lives in another state and he doesn't see the kids right now. So that's even more dangerous. And so that was my beginning of getting connected to the Domestic Violence Center, and then becoming a domestic violence advocate and realizing all of these resources that I wish I had known about that were free before I even got divorced.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And that is huge. And I think it's the subtleties of it, which it's kind of goes in with some of the gaslighting stuff. But I think when it's not as overt, you can't see the physical bruises or the scars. It's just easy to dismiss, and other people dismiss it because they're not aware of the signs and the red flags and all of that, which we'll get into a little more. And since you started sharing a little bit about your story, I would love it if you could share a little more of what you experienced and what led you to do this work.
Oh my gosh, big question, but I'll try. So I was married for nearly 18 years. I was with my ex for 20 years. Never thought it was an abusive relationship. Just thought, some weird stuff till the end. And basically, I found out this term called lying by omission. And that's really that my ex had been living a double life for the entire time. And in the divorce process, my lawyer was encouraging me to look for anything I could find to try to pressure my ex to keep this whole thing out of court. And I discovered things like drafts of personal ads that he was doing while on a honeymoon that he had had affairs basically the entire time and had compartmentalized. So it was like he was this one person and then he was another person with us as the family. So when I started unearthing the beginning of all that and then realizing, oh my gosh, like I don't even know who I've been living with this whole time. It was terrifying, but it took about 2 years to really make my exit safely and figure out how to do it because we have 2 kids and I was very rooted in our community. And in my mind, I thought it's going to cost $10,000 to get a divorce, I heard, and I don't have that kind of money. It ended up costing 10 times that amount in the first year. And then I was in the legal system for 10 years with my ex. I represented myself for 7.5 years of that through about 100 court appearances in 2 states. And my divorce lawyer was lovely and nailed it from the beginning. He said at the end of that year, when we settled 2 weeks before trial, he said, your husband is not going to comply with these orders and he's going to continue to financially decimate you if you hire me or any other attorney. So you're going to have to do this yourself. And then he taught me a little bit about how to start building a case and a paper trail. And so I caught my breath and built a strong case, and a year and 9 months went back on my own, certainly with like legal advice in the background, but not from a hired attorney, and started all those years in court. And so along the way, of course, you can imagine it was extremely frustrating. And I was very conscious that I'm a white woman with a master's degree in education, and I still couldn't get enforcement for years and years and years. And you think about all of the other women and people who get stuck in the family court system, who don't even have those benefits and what they have to tolerate. And this is why so many people give up. So along the way, I represented myself at the the higher court level also, because I was like, I'm not going to spend $15,000 for someone to speak for 20 minutes for me, even though, I know it's like I had been warned it's a little bit riskier. But not only did I win, but the case was so notable that it got published as case law with the state, which is like one of my proudest accomplishments. And every lawyer I speak to is like, I've never heard of that. That's amazing. And then also during that time, I started getting involved a bit in advocacy. And so we had something called Jennifer's Bill come up, which ended up passing. I gave live testimony with about 107 other people from all over the world. And in 2021, it went into effect. And so Connecticut became the 3rd state to expand our legal definition of domestic violence to include all of that invisible abuse called coercive control. And now about 10 or 11 states in America have adopted those laws. And so, so all this stuff was happening, and I was like, this is crazy, because I'm still in court though. So my partner and I, who's my business partner as well as my life partner, and the male half of Been There, Got Out, we decided to really, we started writing a book. And then we were told, your audience doesn't want to read, they need you. So then we figured, let's start doing more coaching. And he got his certification as a high conflict divorce coach. I had gotten certified as a domestic violence advocate. I had been trained as a crisis counselor in college, and then also my master's degree in education, and also all my writing experience. I was like, let's really focus on what I've been living for all these years, legal abuse. And at the time that we started, the term was not known. I found it in like a judge's manual from 2015. And I was like, this is my life. And if I'm dealing with this, there have to be other people. And so I started learning about it. We started a legal abuse support group. I thought, if we can get 2 people, awesome. And then we ended up getting 12 the first week.
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
Was 4.5 years ago, or a little more, almost 5 years ago. And then it just has exploded since then. And so I feel like we really have this specialty because of my wonderful education in the trenches, my training in education, my victories as a pro se, and also having both the male and female perspective on domestic violence. And my partner used to be a financial planner. He's also a really great writer, and he's got a background in tech. And so like his
Wow.
marketing skills and we're both like kind of creative, and I love making like interesting content, and I've taken what I used in my classroom onto the big social media scene. So I love engaging people in conversations. And I know I told you I was going to give you long answers. So
I
that's
love it.
basically where we are now.
Oh, that's so good. I appreciate it. I mean, the more in depth, the better, because it just paints a picture that's so clear. It's so much more clear of what you've been through and what so many women can relate with and can relate to, as well as what you guys are specifically doing to help other people going through some similar situations. And it's neat to hear how you guys seem to really complement each other and bring in these different assets and things that really help build out a more full, like extensive kind of picture that's available for other people who need help like this. I love that. One of the things that I was thinking could help is if you could define for someone listening, if you could define really what legal abuse is, and I believe you use the term as high conflict abuse or something similar to that. So if you could kind of describe what those are and what it looks like, I think it could help someone who might find themselves in a similar situation.
So like I said, as I was going through it for a chunk of that time, I had no idea. I'd never heard the term legal abuse. Now, it's gotten, we've made a lot of content on it. Other people have published a lot because it's a known thing. So legal abuse is also known as litigation abuse, paper abuse, because it has to do with all of the filings done in court, stalking through the court, or judicial terrorism. So it's basically, we say it's when your ex is using the legal system to wear you down and bleed you dry financially. And I often will say that once you've gotten out of one of these unhealthy relationships, that person has lost their power and control over you. So they're limited to three things: money, kids, and the court. And money and the court go hand in hand. And so there's two types of legal abuse. One is something called vexatious litigation or frivolous litigation. And that's where your ex will constantly file motions. That's that paper abuse. So you're forced to hire attorneys, lose work, lose time, feel like your life is consumed by a terrorist that's attacking you. And so a lot of people become homeless or lose their jobs or just lose their sense of self because they're just like every moment, like, what's the next bomb they're about to drop on me? Then the other type is what I had to deal with a lot, where I was dealing with someone who would not comply with court orders. So I was forced to go to court and file motions to get enforcement and compliance with those orders and agreements. And so it's the same impact. It takes forever. You're always taking time off from everything else. I'd spend entire weekends at my dad's office because my house was so cluttered. I'd be like, let me just spread out, Dad. And he would help me like organize things and let me practice my little speeches. And
that's
just,
amazing.
it's so consuming. Yeah. And people who don't understand make things worse because they'll be like, well, why doesn't the judge just do this? Or why doesn't your ex just do what's best for the kids? Because you're dealing with someone who usually has some kind of personality disorder and or active addiction, and they don't care about those things. They don't care about being fair. They don't care about what's best for the kids. They care about themselves and punishing and destroying you. And so they've often found a whole new audience to watch them attack you and decimate you, like I said, financially. So it's very, very hard. Most of our clients tend to be extremely well-educated, highly successful professionals. The irony is we have many attorneys as clients and mental health professionals. And there's this added level of shame because they're like, I'm trained in this. How could I not have seen it? But like I said at the beginning, domestic violence, especially emotional abuse, affects 1 in 3 women and 1 in about 5 men, probably more than that because it's less reported. So many people are dealing with it, but they don't talk about it because there's so much judgment from people who don't understand. These people who are looked at as role models are kind of like, I never thought you would fall for someone like that. Yeah. Just last night, I was at an event and I was talking to somebody and she's like, yeah, I keep wondering why like all these women, just these really smart women keep falling for this stuff. And it was very judgmental. And I thought that's not really worth getting into a long conversation, but I just said, they're targeted because they're so amazing. And this is not something that you see at the beginning. Nobody willingly gets involved with an abuser. This is a very slow process that's very manipulative. And that's why we don't realize it until we're already in it. And then there's all that shame. I can't talk to people about it because they would never believe that I was part of this.
Oh, yeah. My gosh. I can see why the shame would come in. And it is hard because I don't think what you're saying, people understand how deceptive they are. They are master con artists.
Right.
Like, masterful and so charming most of the time too. Very charming, very much like can sweep you off your feet. And it's just very, oh gosh, it takes like a whole other set of senses. It just is so unfortunate because nobody deserves to go through any of this. And I think, like you said, they typically will take advantage of incredible people, women and men, and just slowly erode their sense of self and who they are and their confidence and all of that. It's super helpful to hear you describe really what this looks like as these different types of abuse that haven't been talked about as much. And then I'm thinking of your own story of how you were saying because of the legal abuse and how expensive that is, and really the degrees of how some women or men will, they can end up homeless, they can end up in shelters, they can end up in such a desolate situation. And so it makes sense why you're like, I need to advocate and fight for myself and my kids, but I have to figure out a way to do it where I can actually afford it, even though it's insanely expensive. So what are some of the ways that you've seen when you've worked with clients to be able to help with that? If somebody is just ruthlessly taking them to court constantly, like what are the ways they can protect themselves and their kids from ending up homeless or in those awful situations?
Yeah, I think first it's so important to educate yourself and to learn that your situation is very, very different from normal divorce. So normal divorce or separation, everybody's angry at the beginning. So everything looks like high conflict, but generally 4 to 6 months in, people are like, okay, these bills are getting really high. We have to start focusing on the kids and moving on with our lives. But with high conflict cases, that anger doesn't subside. So one of the problems we see all the time is people being logical, where they're like, well, I can't understand. And also hiring attorneys who are trained in logic, who are doing things without recognizing that there's a very different approach that needs to be taken with high conflict personalities versus normal. So like I mentioned earlier, people like that care about themselves. They often care about money more than anything, as well as appearances. So we have to structure negotiations around making them feel that sense of entitlement that they already have, rather than being like, let's do what's best for the kids, because that doesn't affect them. So when you make it about them and you figure out ways to strategically communicate with them, you can have a much better option. Another thing that is so important, and I mentioned before we came on camera, that Chris and I are actually part of something called the Amicable Divorce Network, which is, again, ironic because we're the only high conflict professionals in it, is that we want to make sure we keep the conflict as low as possible. All of our clients are dealing with extremely high conflict exes, but there's a lot that you can do yourself to lower the level of conflict, because conflict costs money. And so what we want to do is everything possible to keep you out of court. Even though you might end up there, here I'm talking about myself, I was in court for years, but mine was post-judgment. And it was financial. It wasn't about the custody stuff. But in trying to keep you out of court, you retain a lot more power. So for example, when you have children, you're going to have to come up with a parenting plan. And so people are like, I'm going to go to court and a judge is going to make me this amazing parenting plan and they're going to punish my ex and it's going to be that way. But they don't understand that judges and most attorneys imagine that this is like 90% of cases. It's normal. So when they write parenting plans, they'll put the word reasonable in there a lot. You'll come up with a reasonable access time, or you'll come up with something reasonable, or you'll work things out. That does not fly for our clients. So we want to make sure from the very beginning that they start crafting parenting plans themselves and negotiate with their ex and get very clear language that has built-in enforcement, deadlines, and consequences. Because it's not if they violate, it's when they violate. We know they're going to violate the agreement. So what's going to happen next? So that but when you're back in court, you want to make it very clear to a judge what's supposed to happen. And that can really move things along faster. First of all, just working outside of the legal system and not being on the court's calendar, but also having clear instructions as to what to do if you're back in court. And so making sure to put what we call guardrails or buffers into these original agreements. If we can't agree on these major decisions like medical, education, extracurriculars, and religion, first of all, we want to try and get a tiebreaker, but often that's not possible. So when we can't agree, what are we going to put in here so that my ex doesn't just go straight to court? Or I have to go straight to court. So things like mediation, arbitration, alternate dispute resolution. So all of these are things that most people have no idea exists. And that's why it's so important to talk to people who are going to try to be what's called positive advocates and not fan the flames of conflict, because it's not just that it's expensive, it's that your family's going to suffer. Your kids are going to feel it the most. And we want to try to shield kids from conflict as much as possible, because it's not, you hear that all the time, it's not divorce that destroys children, it's conflict. So realizing how much power you have, even when it feels like you don't, is really significant, especially from the beginning. So a lot of what we do focuses on teaching strategic communication to start calming your ex down and building a paper trail and trying to think about alternate ways to resolve these issues rather than just thinking, I'm going to go litigate, because you're not going to find happiness in the court system.
That's really encouraging to hear that there are several alternative options and that you can be highly strategic in this. And it's almost like, I don't know, this is kind of what I'm hearing. It's understanding who you're dealing with on the other side and in a way working with them to help de-escalate the situation.
Exactly.
Where it does take, because it's not, in approaching it as far as like just this lens of what's just and what's not, I can see how that would really ignite the flame because of not considering of the type of person you're dealing with, typically who does not actually care about anybody else except themselves and what's best for them, and wanting to gain that sense of power and control and do anything like by all means necessary. So it's helpful to realize, hey, there's a way that we can go about it considering the type of person we're dealing with here. And we can actually have it still work in your favor, but the approach will be so different. I'm wondering, what are some of the red flags that a divorce or separation may turn into a high conflict situation?
So I remember when I first met with my divorce attorney, our first consult, he said, yours is going to be really bad. And I was like, what? Because I thought my ex was a good person. He had just done some really bad things. And later, because my lawyer and I became very good friends that year, I interviewed him and I was like, what were some of the ways that you knew? And so he gave me a list, which he had never really thought of as a list. It was just his instincts from all of his years practicing. So one of them is when somebody has a personality disorder or an active addiction, they are not in their right mind. They don't have, proper judgment. Their judgment's impaired. So they're not even thinking about their own best interest or any kinds of long-term consequences. So when you're dealing with someone that's completely irrational, it can make things, worse with the conflict, because again, they want to destroy you. They're very angry. They're dealing with all kinds of abandonment issues. Yeah. So that's one of those indications that you could be headed for it. But if you get good advocates and lawyers, even though you might have a high conflict ex, it doesn't have to turn into a high conflict divorce or separation. Another thing is somebody who has the idea that what's what's is mine and what's yours is mine too, especially when it comes to money. And so financial abuse, we know, is present in 99% of these kinds of cases. And so these are the people who are like, well, I made the money and, have hidden the information from you, or you've had to ask for an allowance. And it's not that people don't have different roles in a family with paying bills, but when you've been obstructed from finding out your financial information, that's a different dynamic. So that's an indicator. And often in these high conflict divorces, someone who hides assets is a sign that it's going to be difficult. Another thing that I thought was really, really interesting that my lawyer said, and many attorneys I've interviewed since have echoed, is when you have a domestic violence situation. And I didn't understand why, but they said actually the victim makes it harder because they hope that things are going to change. And so their ex is very good at manipulating them into thinking, oh, you don't need an attorney. Let's just use mine. So there's lots of stalling, false stops and starts because they keep thinking, I don't know if I'm going to do it. But also we find with our clients, they get so overwhelmed that they become paralyzed with producing documents to move the process along. So many times it'll be like, I can't deal with like getting my own financial affidavit together. It's just so overwhelming and I don't even know where to start. So we can work with people like that, but lawyers can get very frustrated because they're like, do you want to do it or not? Their job is to move things along. Yeah. So those are a few of the indicators of high conflict divorce.
Wow, that is really helpful to name, because I think what you just described is a lot of how women or men are feeling when they're married to a partner like that, or if they have been in therapy together and they do know that like their spouse has been diagnosed with a personality disorder, or it has been revealed that they have some form of an addiction. I think it's so helpful to just have these things named and identified very clearly, because then it helps to move out of the fog and out of the confusion that so many live in when you're married to somebody like this. So that is huge. I'm like blown away at how specific, like you've been able to just name. And I mean, I'm not surprised because of all the work that you have done, but that is very hard for most people. They can't name that. And it takes years, if at all, to be able to find people to help them identify who they're dealing with, what specific aspects are so toxic and detrimental to the relationship. And yeah, so thank you for sharing that.
Well, one thing to note is when somebody says my ex is a narcissist or they have an addiction and I'm really worried about it, one of the things to remember is that those people are actually very predictable. So even though it might turn high conflict, again, like we already know what they're going to do. So it's a little bit easier to deal with, because instead of saying like, I hope they don't do this, we're like, they're going to do it. They're going to hire a really bad attorney who's going to bully you in court and threaten you and bring out your past and the fact that you take anti-anxiety medication, all that stuff. It's not that bad, but like we'll deal with it instead of just being scared. The other thing is people often think, well, because there was domestic violence present, that I can't do mediation because of the difference in the power dynamic and I'm really scared of my ex. But I've interviewed collaborative divorce professionals, and some of them are like, yeah, we never want to deal with domestic violence and mediation. But I found some of the more progressive ones like us think that just because you're an abuse victim, you shouldn't be limited on your options. You shouldn't be forced to spend more money than someone else. And so a lot of the work we do is helping you learn to be strategic and stand up to a bully. Because in negotiation, what we don't remember is we've learned really incredible survival skills in that relationship. We know what triggers our ex. We know what calms that person down. So it's such an opportunity. There's a lot to work through to get ready for this, but to deal with this person and to influence them, to help get yourself and your kids out of there, but to still keep it, again, the conflict as low as possible and make them feel like they're winning, because they always need to feel like they're winning and you're suffering. So there's some acting skills involved, but we've had like so much success with people who immediately thought, oh, I can't do it. Like when we first met them, they're like, oh, I'm not going to do mediation. We're like, just keep an open mind. And then even like little bits of progress are huge. And they're not just huge in terms of legally. These are personal triumphs, learning how to start getting your power back. Often one thing that I notice is people who've come out of these types of relationships where there's been this big power differential is they repeat the same unhealthy relationship cycle with their lawyer. They'll be like, okay, I'm getting out of this. And now my lawyer is my knight in shining armor who I'm going to give $30,000 to, and they're going to save my life. That's the same dynamic, thinking like someone else is going to take care of things for you. And so that's really like a place to sort of pause and think it's an opportunity now and now that I got out of this relationship, I need to be more involved in my own life, and I need to understand the decisions I'm making. I need to understand why someone's advising me on certain things. I need to kind of open my eyes more. And this is my first practice with someone who's safe. So, well, hopefully safe. So in choosing like the right attorney and deciding what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, and learning how to say, help me understand, rather than just going along. And I know myself, like I was 23 when I got together with my ex, and I let myself be led. There's reasons. There's like, not to blame a victim, but there's reasons why certain people get involved in those relationships, and I can take responsibility for my part too. But in terms of that, moving forward, what are we going to learn to do differently? Because you can always learn.
That's so powerful. And I'm thinking of so often in relationships like this, you get silenced and you learn to stop speaking up. And that's where it's so disempowering, because people like that with those addictions or personality disorders feed off of trying to manipulate, off of just really the power and control and doing whatever they can. It's very confusing. Like, it's just living in this perpetual state of confusion and fear. And so to be able to enter into a space like that with a lawyer and a legal team that you trust, and in whatever way, shape, or form it looks like, you're right. Like, I could see how that would be very empowering, because you're using your voice, which was silenced for so long. And you also know you're not having to do it alone. So you have the support that you need to help, where people can just help you basically stand up and stay standing. When you start to feel terrified again and your legs are shaking and you're about to crumble, they're there to hold you up. And that when you need it, until you have the strength to get back up again, is the picture that I see. And so, and then the other thing that you mentioned with the predictability, it's like of somebody with a personality disorder or addiction, like that thing, I don't know, just from like the constant fear and this like feeling like it is unpredictable, but the reality of it being like, actually, it's very patterned. And we can predict really what's going to happen. I think it's so helpful, because that's another level of coming out of the cloud of confusion and being like, oh, no, here's what's actually going on. This is what we can predict. So it helps to reclaim sanity too, and be like, okay, I'm not crazy. Like, I felt crazy because I was married to a crazy maker, but I'm not. And like, just, I don't know, having other people to really shed light and bring clarity into a much needed situation is huge. I'm wondering, what patterns do you see typically keep women stuck, overwhelmed, or doubting themselves?
So a lot of it is the dynamic that was established over time, slowly, where they feel like that person has become the authority. And so they end up believing that person more than themselves, because they've lost their sense of self. They've lost their center. And we stop questioning. And only later, when you're out and you get out of the fog, you're like, how could I ever have thought something like that? I remember once when we had to redo our kitchen. Everything had fallen apart. My ex always waited to fix anything. And I ended up getting this female contractor who had been an artist. And I'm kind of artsy, if you haven't guessed.
I love it.
So one of the things she did that I loved was I didn't even realize it at the time, but she said, now's your opportunity. You're going to get this new kitchen. And I was like, oh, I just want functional appliances. And she said, no, I want you to think of something that you love and use that as a basis. And so I had this little Mexican pot with like mosaic that I had gotten on a trip with my sister. And so I was like, I really love this thing. And so we ended up making this incredible backsplash in the kitchen that's all like mosaic. And now it's like super cool. But anyway, but now I'm thinking of like another thing that she did. So she actually started getting me to think for myself rather than just thinking, oh, I don't deserve better than just functioning appliances. But my ex had said, we're not allowed to use the cabinets. We shouldn't put dishes in the cabinets because they're going to fall off the wall because it's not going to take the weight. And I was like, what? Like, that doesn't make any sense. We have brand new cabinets. And he was like, oh, the dishes, we have to use the drawers. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. But for a moment, I was thinking like, maybe he's right because I've been with him this long and he's older and he's really, I thought he was smart. He's not smarter than me, but I thought he was. And so I asked the contractor in front of him, I was like, he thinks that we can't use the cabinets because of the weight. And she's like, no, that's totally not true. But that was like a turning point for me to ask her to sort of deal with the gaslighting that something in me like knew it wasn't right, but asked someone else instead of just accepting this craziness. And of course, in 20 years, there was a lot of craziness that I look back and think, how did I believe that? What land was I living in? But that's how coercive control works. It's like very, very slowly. And there's all kinds of little tests where they'll say things and then they want you to trust them. And then you do. And then you lose your own values.
Yes, this slow stripping away of who you are. And really, actually, I love that example that you gave with that conversation you got to have with her and her asking you, what do you want beyond the bare minimum, beyond just the basics, but because that I could see how that would be really big in reconnecting with, what do I like? Because I've been told I don't like this or I do like, but that's really what he likes or doesn't like. And just being able to have somebody and that just the process of being able to come back and reconnect with those parts of you would be so powerful. But and I just think it's just from like when I worked with clients in domestic violence situations and how frequently people like, it is so much more complicated than that. It is so difficult. The amount of like brainwashing and just this crazy grip that has been created on these women is insane. So it isn't that simple, but I love that like shift for you that you just got to share of what can really help with breaking out of these patterns and learning to trust yourself again, which is very difficult.
One thing to do, just a little tiny thing, and it sounds crazy to people that haven't experienced it, is go to a restaurant and look at the menu and really think about what you want, because many people coming out of these relationships, they can't even order off a menu because their eating has been controlled or the other person's decided. So learning how to just pause and be like, okay, let me think, what do I actually like? And take your time. It sounds crazy, but it's a big deal for people. It's like coming out of a cult.
Oh my gosh. So true. And I think it's helpful to hear it's small. Like it's in these small ways that are actually big. Those are big steps to take, but it doesn't have to be crazy big leaps. It's these small things, even something like looking at a menu and deciding what is it that I actually want to eat, not what I've been told I want or not what I've been told I shouldn't and can't eat, but what do I actually want? Those are practical, everyday little steps that can be taken to help just reclaim your sense of self, your life again, and just like start to build yourself back up to being a whole person. So I love that.
Yeah. There's actually a book called The Power of Fun that I just heard the author I think her name is Catherine Price. She was being interviewed on NPR, and it's all about fun and how that feeling like when we were 5 and playing tag with our friends and just not thinking about anything else, just being so in the moment without distractions and enjoying ourselves. And in the book, she has all kinds of information about fun and brain chemistry, but she has these quizzes and lists of things on questions to ask yourself to figure out what you think is fun. And I found it fascinating and really fun to answer some of the questions. And I think that that's also helpful for people to come out of coming out of these relationships is to do like games like that where they have to, and it's not just like, what do you think is fun, but it'll say specific things like, do you like this particular thing, or do you prefer this or this? So again, it's very small ways, but it's neat to sort of rediscover yourself.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing, because fun is something, it's really, I feel like, a tangible marker of coming out of survival mode. The last thing that we're able to think of is something that I get to do that's enjoyable, that I really
enjoyable.
like.
Not just like self-care. So not like taking like a hot bath or going, but fun, like active and like getting those pleasure hormones.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
And where you're with other people.
Having the connection in that. It's so different. And I feel like it can almost, it's so easy to just lose sight of it or have no idea. If someone were to ask you, what do you like to do for fun? And you draw a blank and you can't answer that, it's probably a good indicator. Like, okay, like where this quiz would be really helpful to reconnect with that part of yourself. But it is essential for us to get back to thriving and flourishing and living a lot more fully alive in the way that we were intended to, where we've just become so used to survival and barely getting by. I feel like that's such a practical way of helping us move out of that. And it doesn't have to be big, like you said, but including people and that level of connection would be really helpful as well. So yeah.
And I mean, even things that are kind of weird that you feel like, oh, but I'm not supposed to, like in doing some of those quizzes, I learned that, and it's like a little embarrassing to say this because everybody likes this, but I'm not super into live music because I get a little bit bored just listening. I love movies and plays, but I'm not really into live music. But I love business brainstorming. I love it. I think it's so much fun to like work with people for ideas with their business to come up with different content and videos. I enjoy that. It brings me pleasure. So I think for people to start tapping into like who they really are and to understand it's okay to enjoy things that most people would be like, what? So weird.
Well, yeah. And I think realizing it's not right or wrong, because so often in those relationships, you're basically told you're wrong for something that is an opinion or it's something that you like or it's unique, that of something that makes up you. And so realizing like I can actually accept and embrace this, and other people can enjoy the things that I don't. But it's like, I don't know, just learning how to identify that and then start doing it and being like, this is, and it feels, I don't know, because I'm just thinking of like how in certain areas where like I would doubt myself and be like, I don't know, like, or look around and compare and be like, is this right? Is it wrong? Right. And it would feel, I felt like a clumsy giraffe trying to like learn how to walk. And as I would just take those steps, but as I did, it would help, like I would be able to embrace those parts of me even more, which was really helpful.
Yeah.
Can you share a story that illustrates what changes when a woman understands the system, trusts herself, and begins to document and respond strategically?
Oh my gosh. So we have so many success stories that we came up with a hashtag. Actually, my friend, business brainstorming, came up with a hashtag. It's called From Puddle to Ninja, because people meet us in this state and they're like, oh, I can't do anything. And then we see them transform and they're like, cool. But there's one of my like our clients from a few years ago, her story was just amazing. So first of all, she's this Indigenous woman. And she had been in this terribly violent, physical, emotional, everything else relationship. And she was out when she met us. But it had been a couple of years since her ex had been paying child support, and they had 2 kids. And so, like many people, she couldn't afford an attorney. She was a special ed teacher, but she had skills from teaching and just her past and knowing her ex. And so she was like, I wonder if I should go back and see if I can get child support and do it on my own. And we were like, of course you should. Like, why not? I mean, that's what we do. And we had gone over documentation. And we also have this weekly legal abuse support group that she had been part of. So we started working with her, and we just did like a couple of sessions. She was so brilliant anyway. And she was great at researching. Many of our clients are. And so she put together these amazing binders, which we went through like the things that had happened. And then she was tying it to her state law, which happened to be California. So when she went into court, against her ex. And so she was pro se. She killed it. Like, she did such a great job. This is someone who used to throw bottles at her face in front of her children.
Wow.
So she was able to be there. The judge was so impressed that he said, "Can I have your binder? I'm going to use this to calculate properly." So she ended up getting what she wanted. She went back again and was able to get restraining orders. But the best part is, from this experience, she decided that she wanted to be a trauma-informed lawyer. So she's now, it's been like 3 years, at least 2 years of law school. I remember because we wrote some of her recommendation letters, but she's been in law school, and I'm not sure when she's graduating, but probably soon. And now she also works with many women in her community, and only 2% of lawyers in our country have that same background, like Indigenous female trauma-informed attorneys. So I got to meet her in real life when our first book came out in 2023, and it was just amazing.
Oh, that is so awesome. That is incredible. And it just shows so much hope. It brings so much hope of what is possible, especially just knowing, okay, her background, like being able to use her background, which I wouldn't necessarily think, that would parlay into court like this, with her being a teacher and just using these different things. And I just think it's easy for people to discount themselves and not realize the experiences they've had, what is in them that they can bring. And you guys get to draw that out and help them. That is incredible. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you shared that story. Thank you. Well, as we are coming to a close, Lisa, can you share where people can connect with you to learn more, and if there's other resources that you have available?
Well, we have a lot. So first of all, like, super easy. Our website is beentheregotout.com. It's just Chris and I. If you want to write to us, it's just lisa@beentheregotout.com or chris@beentheregotout.com. It's just the two of us, so we always answer. We are very active on social media. I do all the content myself, and Instagram is our home base. So if you just look up Been There, Got Out, it's the one with the little picture of Chris and I. And then we also have our first book that came out in 2023. It's called Been There, Got Out: Toxic Relationships, High Conflict Divorce, and How to Stay Sane Under Insane Circumstances. The next book is coming out in a couple of months. It's called When Your Ex Turns the Kids Against You. And it's about how to handle alienation in and out of a courtroom setting. We're starting this series of online courses called From Fear to Fierce in Family Court. So we have one on strategic communication. It's called How to Communicate with Your Ex Without Destroying Your Case or Losing Your Mind, since that's like the big thing with everyone's PTSD. We do more than everything. And then, but one of my favorite things, besides like working with individuals, is our weekly legal abuse support group, where we do the unusual thing of blending our male and female clients together, because we firmly believe that abuse is a human issue, not just a gender issue. And so in the group, we basically strategize and we get into the bigger issues of how are my kids going to be okay with a parent like that, and how do I co-parent with a terrorist? And so I love seeing men and women really coming together and supporting each other. I think it's really great for each of them as well to see that, you know, we all protective parents want the same thing. So so we're coming out with another course on alienation that's going to go with the book. And then my partner, Chris, is an expert in writing high conflict parenting plans.
Oh, so, wow. Yeah, oh my gosh. That is amazing. I love it. I'm a huge resource fan. Huge, because we need that. We need guidance, especially navigating something like this that can feel big and scary and unpredictable. I love that you have so many different options for people to be able to get the help that they need. So thank you for sharing that and for the work that you're doing. I'm really grateful to just have you on today for this episode, getting to share your experience, your stories, your insights. I just can't thank you enough. So thank you so much, Lisa.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Well, if this conversation has helped you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember that you are not alone. Thank you so much for listening, friend. I cannot wait to talk with you next time. Thanks for listening to Let's Get Real. If you've been feeling stretched thin, stuck in survival mode, or like you've lost yourself in motherhood, I made something just for you. It's called the Overwhelmed Mom's Guide, and it's totally free. Inside, I walk you through simple steps to help you reconnect with who you are, find a bit more breathing room in your day, and start to feel like you again. You can grab it now. Just click the link in the show notes. You don't have to keep doing this alone. Let's take the next step together.